Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the Dairy Signal. We're going to be discussing a topic that is ever so important, especially as we near the end of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And that is how our mental health, as well as our healthy regiments, play into each other so we can have the best life possible while also making sure that we kind of stay balanced in what can oftentimes be a very busy season of the year, especially as for many people, you're probably thinking about where am I at on planting? Where is hay at for cutting? And everything else in between that we have to deal with in terms of not only having a successful dairy farm, but living a balanced life. Well, as balanced as it can be when you're a dairy farmer, I guess. And joining us this afternoon, we're excited to have back Amy, who is founder and president of Farmer's Daughter Consulting. And Amy, I'm so excited to have you back on discussing this topic because not only, as I said, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, but you have such an array of areas that we can talk about and really dive into this afternoon that not only are areas which you probably can think of, oh, yes, that will make sense, and, hit on areas that we all probably could do a little bit more thoughtful thinking around, but also some tips and tricks and thoughts of things that we might not realize might be impacting our not only physical but mental health as well. So, Amy, would you mind giving our audience a little bit of a brief introduction about yourself since it's been a second since we've had you on?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Amber. I'm delighted to be here with you today to talk about subjects near and dear to my heart. My business is called Farmer's Daughter Consulting because I am a farmer's daughter. I grew up on a integrated cow-calf operation and row crop operation in Northeast North Dakota. My dad and my grandfather had dairy cows on the farm until about the mid 70s, but then they moved into the cow-calf operation. Um, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 7. My dad also had type 1. And so I saw registered dietitians when I was growing up and decided that's what I wanted to become. I did learn during my internship that I didn't love working in hospitals. And so I took a different route. So I've worked in nutrition communications, education, and marketing for my career. And when I started my business nearly 11 years ago, National Dairy Council was my first client. So anything related to dairy is near and dear to my heart for personal and professional reasons. And I'm excited today to talk about the importance of mental health.
Well, we're excited to dive really into this because there's a couple different buckets that really can impact not only our physical health, but our mental health as well. And as those in the dairy and agriculture space, we know there's a lot of stress, and we know that unfortunately it is one of the most stressful professions that there is in terms of not only safety, but also in terms of mental health. So diving right into it, Amy, I know one of the areas in which I feel like we talk about enough in the general public and in the general term of making sure that you get enough sleep to manage your stress. But I know as a farmer that some days that sounds so wonderful and rosy, but the actuality of it all is that you sometimes have a struggle to get that sleep in. So let's talk about the relationship, though, between sleep quantity, quality, and ultimately our health in the long run.
Yeah, there has been a lot of research done over the years about the impact of sleep quality and quantity on health outcomes, most notably heart disease risk and cancer risk. So, one of the interesting findings is people who work night shifts, maybe factory workers or nurses and other hospital staff working those night shifts, they have a higher risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancer. So if you are sleeping when it's nighttime, you are better off than folks who are sleeping during the daytime. Part of that has to do with when our brains naturally make a substance called melatonin. And if some of you are thinking, hey, I've heard of that, yeah, you can buy melatonin supplements. They can help kind of calm you and enhance sleep, that deep, restful sleep that gives not only our bodies a chance to rest, but our brains. When it comes to cardiovascular health, keeping our hearts healthy, reducing risk of type 2 diabetes, the research shows that the sweet spot for sleep is about 6 to 9 hours a night. If you get less than 6 or more than 9, your risks increase. So somewhere between 6 and 9. And so I know that if I don't have to set an alarm, I feel great if I get about 8.5 hours of sleep. Whereas my husband, he only needs 6. We're different people, there are different needs. So you can't really pinpoint the perfect number for everybody, but the research over many, many years with hundreds of thousands of people shows that it's that between 6 and 9 hours a night. And then the question is, what's the quality? If you have, an Apple Watch or another smart device on your wrist that can help you see, how much of that deep sleep you get, and if you're noticing, like, man, you're just waking up all the time, is that because you are anxious and stressed out and you're worried about, the next loan payment, you're worried about cows that are calving, you're worried about farm operations, you're worrying about tension in a relationship, whatever it is, you have to seek to find ways at the end of your day to say, that's a tomorrow issue. My project right now is to get a good night's sleep. There are lots of apps that can help with that. There are other people who can help with that. I just know that if you're struggling with sleeping, you have to find ways to solve that because everything else when it comes to health and wellness, including mental health and wellness, is related to sleep quality.
Well, I think that's a really interesting area to be thinking about is that, we think about quantity a lot of making sure you hit that 6 to 9 hours. I've heard that one, consistently now, but the quality is such an interesting aspect of, okay, well, it sounds all great and wonderful, but if I'm waking up in the middle of the night, I'm waking up in the middle of the night, dang it. So, is there any tips or tricks that you might be able, or resources you might be able to point people to if they're looking to improve their quality? Because quantity, I mean, I don't want to say it's not just go to bed earlier, set your alarm later type of situation, because that's very different depending on where you're at in life. But quality feels a little bit harder to grasp in terms of what can I do?
Yeah, it's a question of what's causing the disturbance in deep sleep. And again, if it's something that's making you anxious and stressed and you've got your heart racing at night because you wake up because you're trying to solve a problem or you're stressed about a problem you haven't figured out how to solve, that's something where you need to define what it is. I can tell you as a middle-aged woman, having gone through menopause, I had to turn to hormone replacement therapy because my sleep was completely disrupted. This is just a little aside, but when a woman gets a hot flash or night sweats, that is caused by a surge of adrenaline in the body. And adrenaline is one of the hormones. It actually stops the action of insulin. So for someone like me with type 1 diabetes, my blood sugars were going higher and higher. And so after a few months of this, my medical care team agreed that yes, they could put me on hormone replacement therapy. It helped regulate my blood sugars. It helped decrease my stress because I was stressing about blood sugars, which makes them worse. So anyway, this is all interrelated. And if you are a middle-aged woman out there and somebody has said to you, you have prediabetes, your A1C is going higher, your blood sugars are trending higher. You may want to think about, menopause as a potential factor in that and whether you and your doctor want to make the choice of additional therapy for that.
I think that's a great way to say that, there's so many different factors and sometimes finding that right resource or maybe just, digging in a little bit more on yourself of thinking about, well, what is going on? Am I waking up in the middle of the night because I drank too much water and I maybe need to adjust when I'm drinking my water during the day? Or is it something where it is medically related that you might need to get your doctor in on? That is incredibly important as well. So I think that's a great internal look and reflection of what can I do or what am I noticing in trends that can maybe help or maybe it is you got some anxiety going on and you need to make a brain dump list before you go to bed because I sure know that one helps when you have one of those long days after work. But moving on to some other areas. Oh, yes, sorry, you
Actually,
go,
yeah.
baby.
You said drinking water, and yeah, getting up and going pee because maybe you had too much water. I don't know that that's as big of an issue of concern for me as people drinking too much alcohol or any alcohol, because the metabolism of alcohol, it's done in our liver, but there are metabolic byproducts that trigger our brain to go, wake up. So if you think that a glass of something is going to enhance your sleep, it for most people will make you sleepy. but it will mess with your sleep and you'll be awake 4 to 6 hours later. The other issue is having a really big evening meal within 2 hours of sleep. That is a cause of a lot of disrupted sleep as well. People just aren't comfortable. So if you can eat a little earlier in the evening, give yourself 3 or 4 hours before you're going to bed. That can be helpful. The final thing is, phones, TVs, iPads in the bedroom. We all have them. Okay, fine. But turning them off so that the notifications aren't triggering you to wake up on your phone. Looking for sources of blue light, any of those little dots on electronic devices, covering them. Any sort of light triggers our brain. Even when we're sleeping, if something's flashing and it disrupts the production of melatonin in our brains, which again has an impact on sleep, heart health, cancer risk. So, okay, don't eat too much before bedtime. Don't drink too much before bedtime. Get rid of those ultraviolet lights, the blue lights. Don't, if you wake up in the middle of the night, do not pick up your phone. Just, okay, it's time to go back to sleep. This is a discipline thing. And I say this as someone married to somebody who will always pick up his phone at 2 in the morning when he's awake. And then what does it do? Wakes me up.
It's so much easier said than done, it feels like some days. But those are all great tips and things that we can actively do ourselves that, might be impacting our sleep just as much. But, moving on to the next portion, and I think this is another one that sometimes we forget about is, especially when we're busy, it's eating healthy and eating to feel well. And I know this is definitely, as a dietitian, an area of expertise here for you, but how does our eating habits impact not only our health in terms of physical well-being, but how does it go into our mental well-being as well?
Do you know the term hangry? When you're angry because you're hungry, some of the eating habits that can get us all into situations where we can't control our rage or our stress. When we're skipping meals, it's a habit that doesn't typically serve us well. Um, there's a lot to this question, but I can tell you that, having some breakfast in the morning. If some breakfast means your beverage of choice to start the day, plus something that has some protein and carbs, like a slice of toast and a fried egg, or some cottage cheese and a piece of fruit, or some yogurt and a granola bar, whatever suits you. But figuring out how do you get some carbs and some protein to start your day, having something for lunch, having a midday meal. I said lunch because I'm in California. I should probably say dinner and then thinking about your supper. But thinking about how do you give yourself a chance, even 15 minutes, to have a mindful moment of food. And then if those aren't possible, what are the things that you're going to pack with you to have in your pocket, in your truck, so that you can stave down hunger in a better for you way. So I said a granola bar earlier. You got a packet of mixed nuts. Man, I love the ones they sell at Costco, the mixed nuts or Sam's Club that are in those little sleeves. Um, String cheese, that I could go on and on about product recommendations, but what do you like? And what's going to be something that's going to have some protein, a little bit of carbs, not just a sugar bomb? I know that my brothers in North Dakota all love a mid-afternoon Mountain Dew. And every time I see that or hear that, I'm like, please find a better beverage. One of them, I got him onto chocolate milk, and now he tells me how great chocolate milk is. So I've saved one brother, got a couple others to work on. So, these are the habits that I want people to think about. How do you have something that's a better for you choice that's ready when you need it versus going, oh gosh, I'm starving. I don't have anything. I'm just going to press the button on that soda machine and get what I want for a little boost. Of course, there are things like getting your 3 servings of dairy, shown to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease, which is still the biggest killer in this country. Getting that dairy also helps reduce blood pressure, which is the number one threat to cardiovascular health around the world. Do you want me to keep going, Amber? I mean, this is like the 3 hour lecture I could give, right?
Well, and I appreciate that because it's one of those areas where, the tips and tricks and the little things that make a difference are not necessarily switching every habit you have overnight, but the little things. One of the areas, you're talking about that brother who has that Mountain Dew in the mid-afternoon, and I think about, gosh, uh, we all, not we all, but many of us need a little extra caffeine or a little something pick me up in the afternoon, especially if you had a bigger lunch and you're getting a little sleepy there. And I can only imagine if you're in a tractor and combine some of that nice summer heat coming in, you really can get a little sleepy. So, what are some of your suggestions to kind of help navigate that quote unquote mid-afternoon slump, but keeping yourself so yeah, you don't always have to reach for the pop if
Yeah.
possible.
Well, think about it. Do you need something because you're truly hungry? Then something like, beef jerky, a Slim Jim, some mixed nuts, string cheese, great options. Do you need something because you're thirsty? Maybe water's the best option. Or do you need a little caffeine boost, but not so much mid-afternoon, so it interrupts your sleep, your ability to fall asleep later. When I need a little afternoon caffeine boost, I'll do one of my little K cups, my little Keurig thing. And so I'll do a little shot of coffee with some milk. And then and I add a little equal to it. So, I have my little wet latte, cappuccino, whatever, I guess iced latte. Yeah. And so, you have to figure out what is the prompt. Oftentimes we just get into habits and we don't really recognize what we're feeling. So you just go for the thing that you're used to doing. But if you start to think about what's gonna make me, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? And then picking something that fits that need state versus picking the same thing over and over.
Which makes sense. I mean, a lot of this, it sounds like so far, is sometimes you got to take a second to take a step back and reflect on what you're doing and your habits that you've got. But one of the other questions I have, especially when you mention hangry, we all know that, that's never a fun place to be, but are there other ways that nutrition affect not only like our mood and brain chemistry, but also some of our emotional resilience? How is that connected? Is there any other ways that we can think of or maybe even put together in our minds that that's why I react that way after, maybe I haven't eaten all day.
This is another really fantastic question and interesting area of research. The research over the past 10 years in this area has largely focused on what's the gut-brain axis, meaning what's our gut microbiome doing that's affecting mood, brain health. Um, One of the most recent seminars I went to on this looked at the diversity of good bacteria in our guts. And so, how do you get diversity of good bacteria? Well, people who have dogs have better diversity in their gut because dogs bring in bacteria from the outside world, lick our faces, we pet them, we touch our faces, and we start getting colonized with what they're finding in the environment. Some of it's not great, but some of it can be very beneficial. The other habit of people who have more diverse good bacteria in their GI system are people who eat a diversity of cultured and fermented dairy products. So, like those little shots of products like Yakult, buying different types of yogurt versus the same brand all the time because different companies use different proprietary yogurts or different proprietary strains of good bacteria to culture their products. If you like kefir, if you like buttermilk, cottage cheese that has different strains added to it. So thinking about your dairy habits, I'm a brand loyal Gen Xer, man. My parents bought that brand. I still buy that brand. But I now, after learning this, go to the grocery store and I'm like, okay, last time I bought this cottage cheese. This time I'm buying this cottage cheese. I am a loyal Yakult drinker, man. I tell you, the flavor of those, it's like lemon meringue pie. I love those products. And that Yakult is the only company in the world that like uses this one strain of bacteria that is very beneficial. Anyway, this is me completely nerding out about everything I learned at this seminar at UC Davis last year. Um, and I've completely lost my train of thought, Amber. Yeah, so anyway, that gut brain axis. It is a very interesting area of research, and the more we learn about it, the more it is showing that, yeah, what is going on in our GI system is having a huge impact throughout the rest of our body, particularly for mood and brain health. And so, thinking about what you're feeding your gut, let me just say that a Mountain Dew does nothing good for your gut. Okay. But getting some yogurt, getting some cheese, getting those fermented dairy products in your system can do good things for your gut. Getting the protein can do good things for keeping that energy lasting longer so that hunger is more staved off in the future that day. Yeah.
So one of the other phrases that I have always heard is, eat the rainbow, that kind of idea, and that not only it helps fuel yourself, but it's good for the body. How does that play into this? Does it help with gut? Is it just a kind of catchy, gimmicky way to help remember not to just eat just your good old meat and potatoes, or how does that play a role?
Yeah, Eat the Rainbow was something that people in the produce industry, embraced and promoted broadly. And I was part of that. I used to work for Dole Food Company back when it was the biggest fruit and vegetable company in the world. And Eating the Rainbow, what does it talk about? It talks about the bright colors of produce items, products made with fruits and vegetables. But one of the things that it negates is the power of white foods. So, for example, a white onion has a compound called.
Hey everyone, it looks like Amy is frozen here. Apologies for the delay in that. We will work on getting Amy back. And in the meantime, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one of our upcoming programs. And we have an upcoming program this summer called PDP Accelerate. And in this program, it is for our college age students and interns who are working within the agricultural workforce. And it's a really cool opportunity for those of that age range to gain some skills and experience in a safe environment to help them grow those skills that they're going to need to be successful in the future, especially in today's workforce. This year, we have a really exciting opportunity to focus and promote and those skills up communication, presentation, as well as being able to learn more and network with others who are also in the agricultural realm of things. So if you're somebody who is got an intern this summer, I would highly encourage you to check out PDP Accelerate, which is on July 22nd, and get them registered. And you can learn more about that by heading over to our website at pdpw.org. And I think, hold on 2 seconds, we might have Amy back. Amy, can you hear us?
Yeah, hey, sorry about that. Internet went down.
Amy, I can't say too much over here. That was my week last week. So appreciate you joining us back in here. I was just telling folks about PDP Accelerate, which is a program for our college age intern students. But when we were talking last and where we got froze with you, it was when we were talking about the onion and what the white and foods have to offer. So would you mind maybe starting in that realm again?
Yeah, absolutely. So onions are one of the top sources of a phytonutrient called quercetin. And onions are also one of the most powerful prebiotics that feed the good bacteria in our gut that do good things for our mental health. So, you know, just getting too focused on bright colors leads us to think foods like onions or mushrooms or bananas or potatoes. So these foods sometimes get overlooked because they lack bright colors. Anything that is a fruit or vegetable is going to have benefits for your overall health and well-being. Many of them are very beneficial for our guts. If you like beans or lentils, those are good for our guts for other reason. So eating the rainbow, I tend to think of it as kind of old school nutrition. It's kind of like talking about the basic four food groups. It resonated with people. People still love that. But I like to remind people that there are lots of foods that lack bright colors that are really, really good for us. And oh, by the way, that white milk, another one of those white foods that is often overlooked.
So I think that's a really great point is that if it works for you, great, but also thinking outside that and having more versatile options is just as important with looking at some of those staple items might be just as good for you. One other question I have for you in this area is, are there foods that can actively boost mood or reduce stress, or are those kind of a myth or a wish we could have type of situations?
The foods that probably have the most research in this area for direct impact on the brain are berries. So blueberries kind of started this research back in the 90s, looking at how blueberry extract in rat kibble could influence, the aging of a rat's brain. And now the global berry research community, which surprisingly isn't very big, there's maybe 40 researchers around the world who exclusively study berries, everything from cranberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, throughout that whole family. And yeah, they're showing that berries, in addition to protecting the brain from aging, helping maintain cognition, protecting our hearts, potentially reducing risk of diabetes, that they also may have some of that gut brain connection to boost happiness. So,
Well, that's fascinating. And I mean, if nothing else, it's a great time of year for them with all of them getting ready and ripe here. So, perfect excuse to go get yourself some berries, it sounds like. But Amy, especially that as a registered dietitian, what are some of the habits you would wish people would maybe take up more, and especially that will help promote a better lifestyle?
you know, we're talking about mental health and wellness here and stress in our lives. And I think that every listener could probably easily identify one thing he or she knows would be a good change based on what do you like to eat? What's your lifestyle like? What are your food preparation habits? If none, where do you like to go out and eat and pick up food? Don't go global on yourself. Pick one thing that you already know. If you're that Mountain Dew in the afternoon guy, what can you do to maybe switch to the chocolate milk like my brother Paul? What's that one habit that you can change, that you're willing to change? We are very stubborn people. We all still act like we're rebellious teenagers, right? And so figuring out what's that one change. If the one thing is, I really need to do a better job of sleep, and I know that I could just turn off the TV, set down my iPad, laptop, phone 30 minutes earlier and just get an extra half hour of sleep, that's great. Sleep relates to your wellness in every other area we've been talking about today. So that's my advice. Take a moment to be mindful, pick that one thing that would be beneficial to you and that you're willing to do consistently, not just today, but consistently over time. That's what my wish is for everybody listening today.
I think that's a fantastic wish as we're thinking about, especially those two core areas in which we know we can make a good amount of change in. We just have to have that willingness to look and reflect and then to make that change. And it's starting with the small changes. It's starting with that Mountain Dew, or in my case, maybe coffee. But as we think about other areas beyond our sleep and our food habits, what are some of the other areas that, really impact not only our physical health, but mental health as well, that we might not necessarily think about, or maybe it has more of an impact and it's just not being talked about in today's mainstream media?
Gosh, everything's talked about in media today, right? Either traditional, new, or social. So one of the habits that I watch a number of people do in my community here in California is they skip breakfast because they say they don't like breakfast. They skip lunch because I'm too busy, and then they eat a massive meal in the evening. That habit is directly tied to dramatically increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So if that's a habit that you're doing, try to find ways to break your food consumption for the day into either snacks throughout the day, three traditional meals. But if that's your habit, break that habit. Eating alone is associated with decreased longevity. So if you are eating alone, maybe it's that you're eating in the TV and you consider eating in the TV, eating in front of the TV, and you're having a conversation with people on the TV. They're not going to talk back to you, but that's okay. It's creating a sense of community. If you can find a way to eat more meals with people who know you and love you, that is very powerful. And I hate to admit this as a registered dietitian, but it's more powerful than what's on the plate in front of you. Having those social connections are very, very powerful. We talked earlier about how if you have a dog, you're more likely to have a more diverse gut microbiome, more good bacteria in your gut. But just taking time to pet a cat, pet a dog, pet a dairy cow, just that act of soothing petting of an animal slows our heart rate, which is good for stress hormone production, soothing our brains, soothing our spirits. What else have I not heard people talking about lately? So much of what I hear makes me crazy because it's so wackadoodle and anti-science. So I'm the one being triggered and reacting to crazy things out there in social media. Um, I think I've covered the big ones. Well, here's one I know that people love to talk about. You have to drink 8 glasses of water a day. You actually don't. You can get water through milk, through coffee, through fruits and vegetables, through soups, other foods that are high in water content. So drinking water is a good habit. Drinking water in place of something where you don't need the calories. You shouldn't be getting all that sugar from something like that damn Mountain Dew. Drinking water is a good thing, but don't be so obsessed with it. You can get water and hydration from the foods that you eat.
Well, that's a good tip. I mean, it's very easy to get caught up in the you have to hit X amount in order to be successful for the day of drinking your water or whatever the goal is, when really there's ways that can be tweaked and changed. But one thing that I'm kind of noticing within a lot of these areas that we've talked about is sometimes it's just the slowing down. The slowing things down. And would you mind touching a little bit on that and how that impacts not only, it sounds like physically, but I can imagine mentally as well.
Yeah, I mean, any of these changes to promote better mental health, better physical health, has to be done in a mindful manner. And in today's society, we're all just triggered nonstop by messages, data, inputs, other people. It takes it takes some effort to say, I'm not going to respond to emails as soon as they come in. I'm not going to read a text as soon as they come in, to say, I'm going to take a little time for me just to think about what I need here and now. I'm going to write a to-do list for my day or put it on my phone and go through that versus being reactionary. I'm going to be mindful about what I'm going to choose to eat at this next meal versus going through the drive-through and saying, I'll take the number 2. I always get it, you know. So I think that that act of slowing down to smell the roses, to use that old saying, whether that is to admire a beautiful new calf and just being grateful in that moment for the beauty of that calf, to admire all those hay bales out there and to count them in a slow, thoughtful way and give yourself an attaboy, or to, express gratitude to others on your team who are doing good work on behalf of your operation. Any of these things that slow down and keep us in the present moment versus being anxious and stressed about what's in the future will be helpful for our mental health and our physical health, particularly if it's focused on a habit that's good for you. And oh, by the way, slowing down, breathing more deeply, taking time to pet a cat, these are good for you.
So how does slowing down your heart rate, because you've mentioned it a few times, how does that help a person? Because it sounds so, I don't want to say easy in theory, but it's one of those areas where you really do have to think about it. You have to take that moment, you have to take that time to help slow down your heart rate or find ways in which to do so. But how is it beneficial for a person?
So, think about our hearts pumping 60 to 90 beats a minute every day throughout a lifetime. A heart is a pump that can get worn down. So by slowing down your heart rate, you're protecting that piece of very valuable machinery. When you slow your heart rate, you also lower your blood pressure, which is beneficial for reducing risk of heart disease, stroke, aneurysms. Um, that very active slowing down, how do you do it? I use my Apple Watch. I put on my heart rate monitor and I practice breathing in for 4 and out for 8. Breathing in for 4, out for 8. I keep my arm in the same position. Even moving your arm around may adjust your heart rate or the reading on the watch. And just getting your heart rate to drop, you know, figuring out, what's your typical, and okay, can I drop it down 2, 3 beats per minute so that I've got a slightly lower resting heart rate. That act of breathing deeply can also soothe your mind. When you're just focusing on breathing, it's kind of a form of meditation. I hate meditating, can't do it. Brain won't slow down that much. But these breathing exercises are very beneficial.
I think that's a really easy and practical tool for a lot of people because yes, I mean, when you think about slowing down, I think everybody goes, "Oh, well, I'm not going to meditate." And I understand that and feel that because yes, to find the time and to get your brain to be quiet for that long is a challenge, I feel like for so many. But breathing is a really easy thing you can do no matter where you're at and in a place where it doesn't have to take long to have an impact. But on the flip side of it, let's take a second because I don't think I know I for sure didn't ask this up top and probably should have, but when we're thinking about, things that are not good for us in terms of mental health, stress has got to be up there as number one. But how else does it impact the body in, potentially negative ways?
So, stress hormones are really creepy little dudes. I mean, they're wreaking havoc throughout the body. Stress hormones are causing our arteries to stiffen, which then over time increases blood pressure. Stress hormones are causing our brain to go into a fight or flight response, which causes you to have an increased heart rate so that you're ready. This is from prehistoric times. It's part of the evolution of the species. If you got to get away from the mastodon or the saber-toothed tiger, you got to be ready for that, or you got to fight off somebody with a bigger, rock than you. Um, stress hormones, they also increase blood sugar. So if you already have type 2 diabetes and you're stressed all the time, that's keeping your blood sugars higher. And your doctor's going to be saying, we need to up the meds, we need to put you on insulin. And if you can do something to lower your stress, that will help lower your blood sugars. So, I mean, seriously, stress hormones, we have to have some of it. There's a little bit of stress that is motivating in our lives and that is okay. But when your heart rate is continually elevated, when your blood sugars are surging, when you're like just kind of stiff, your arteries as well as your whole body all the time because you can't loosen up and let go of some of the crap out there that stresses us out. It's every time it's happening, it's shaving a little bit off your lifespan. It's certainly stealing your happiness. So, and that deep breathing again says to the stress hormones, you're not needed right now. You can take a break.
Dual purpose, it sounds like. Got a lot of benefits with some of that deep breathing. I want to go back to one of the areas which you commented on earlier, and that was, you talked about not eating alone, but one of the areas that I think also is important is that community interaction or that social interaction. And I know so many people, especially in agriculture, talk about how, well, I am a very independent person. I really am okay with, doing what I do day in and day out. And while that is wonderful, let's talk about how community and social interactions have such a big impact on mental health and mental wellness.
Yeah, being around people, we are herd animals, just like the cows that your audience is caring for. And so your herd doesn't have to be in the same home as you, but having some connections in your community with the people you work with the people at the local gas station, with the people in the grocery store, people at church, having a few conversations with people who know you. One of the most powerful questions you can say to somebody you see is, "Hey, how's your day going?" First, it's just hi, because then the response is hi. But if you say, "Hey, how's your day going?" People usually go, "Great, crap, awesome, never better, it's terrible," and it opens up the door for a little bit of conversational back and forth to make us feel more connected. We all have smartphones these days. If there's anybody, well, there's nobody in your audience who doesn't have one. We all have them, right? So just uh, picking up the phone to have a quick chat with somebody. I know my brothers in their machinery this time of year are gossiping nonstop with other farmers about who's doing what and planting what or who hasn't planted yet. My gosh, it's what, May 27th. So yeah, I mean, I think all of those connections, when they're done in the spirit of goodness and kindness, help us with that sense of community and that we're not in this alone. We're here together. We're all bumbling around this planet, doing the very best we can for those we love. And, sharing a little bit more of that is good for other people, even more so for us when we're offering it out to the world.
And one of the other things, I mean, I guess the way you were thinking about this, or the way I'm thinking about this, I should say, excuse me, is that, a lot of it is the enjoyment of being around others, but how is also finding joy or having other hobbies or other things outside of farming? How important is that in terms of, having that structure and discipline that we go to every day to make sure that our cows are cared for and that they have a consistent life? And what does that do for us in the long term?
Well, again, I'm laughing at your question about something outside of farming. In the family I grew up on, hobbies were not really well known. I have one brother that finally learned how to golf, but then, I don't have time for that because there's always something on the farm that needs attention. But I think anything that gives us moments of joy and pleasure, um, if everything that you love is related to your farm and you love fixing fences or you love welding to fix equipment, then go with it. Be who you are. But for many of us, work creates stress and routines that maybe confine us. And so finding things like I love gardening. Now, I have a princess garden. They're raised garden boxes, but I love tending to my tomato plants. Anybody can grow tomatoes in Sacramento, California. I get great joy from that because it allows my brain to do something tactile. I like the aromas of fresh herbs, and stress just seems to dissipate. Same thing. I love watercolor painting. These are things that bring me joy in a different way. I love the work that I do, but it's kind of makes me feel constrained at times. So anything that brings you peace, and I'd say anything for which you're not paying attention to the clock is good for your mental well-being, your stress levels. There's a researcher from Russia who wrote about this probably 35 years ago now, and it's called flow. If you are doing something and you do not have any sense of time and you're enjoying doing it, it's flow, and it's very, very good for our mental well-being.
So it really does go to show that, having fun, having or finding things that you enjoy, even in those stressful days or those time periods in which you're having long hours, can really make a big impact in how you go about life, but also how you feel about what you're doing. So, one of the areas that is probably a little bit harder to talk about, but I think is, equally as important, is talking about those days when you might not be having a good day, or that somebody else might not be having a good day, but it's lasts longer than a day. It's those times where you can see somebody struggling. So do you know of any tools or resources in which that if you need support, or if you need to support somebody else, that are out there, that might be a way for a farmer to talk to a farmer, or a family member, or a friend?
This is getting into an area for which it's beyond my scope of practice as a registered dietitian. But I will say, if you have the sense that someone is not okay, a gentle hand on a shoulder and a caring look in the eye to say, "Are you okay? How can I help you?" opens the door for somebody. Most people, I'm going to say this on behalf of my family, um, will not admit to much. Some might, but I think if you're legitimately concerned, there are community resources in many communities where you can call and say, maybe it's a pastor who can have those crucial conversations with somebody. Maybe it's a spouse or other family member. Maybe it's a medical professional. But I think if you have the sense, or you overtly know something is not right with someone in your farming community, I would say it is your responsibility as a fellow human to take a moment. And when I say reach out, I honestly mean a touch on the shoulder, a gentle touch, so that somebody feels that calming presence of your hand, and then your heart saying, "Is everything okay? How can I help you?"
Well, Amy, I appreciate you saying that. And I know I definitely did take it outside of the scope of a registered dietitian, but as somebody who's, had so much experience with others, it's always great to hear about what sometimes gets to people. And it is that human interaction some days. I want to bring it back to, some of the tools and some of the things that we can maybe think about, whether it's the habits that we talked about earlier, maybe the breathing and utilizing a smartwatch, but are there any other tools or apps or resources in which you would recommend for people as they're trying to think about how is my physical health in terms of my sleep, my nutrition, my other habits impacting my mental health that you could recommend?
Aside from what I've already talked about, things like using your smartwatch to track your heart rate, to work on slowing your breathing, there are endless apps out there, in both the app stores, where you can find something to meet your need. Um, I have a hard time recommending anything specific beyond the Weight Watchers app because that's the one I've used. It's very positive. The messaging is positive. It's simple. It's intuitive. And if anybody's listening, going, "Holy crap! A dietitian used the Weight Watchers app?" Yeah, because even dietitians need help once in a while, reminding ourselves to be accountable. When it comes to weight management, things that are most beneficial are tracking your food every single day. And that's what an app like that makes easy. But if you're trying to make any changes in habits, writing it down somewhere, putting it in your phone, finding a way to track it to help yourself stay accountable to what you're committed to doing, that is very beneficial, because we get distracted easily. Ooh, there's something shining over there that needs my attention. But if your goal is to say, I'm going to go back to that, replace the Mountain Dew, then maybe you just start, on a calendar. I have a paper calendar in my office where I mark off the days of the month that I go to yoga or go to the gym. And then at the end of the month, I'm like, hey, look at you. You did it. You met your goal, and that positive feedback is very powerful. But going back to the specific tools, man, here I am, a smartwatch and a paper calendar. That's as good as I have for specifics today, Amber.
You know what? But sometimes going back to the basics is not a bad thing and it can really make a difference. And I really love how you said it, that reminding ourselves to be accountable. It's finding those ways that work for us, especially as we're maybe working on a habit or trying to track and see what we're doing to really help make a difference within our health and our mental health. One of the other questions I have for you before we wrap up here is that, are there any few small tweaks or changes that you could recommend, especially being a farmer's daughter and knowing the mindset that you would recommend to farmers make this week, whether it's mentally or physically, that could really help them, that makes a quick difference? And I know nothing is a silver bullet and quick difference long term, but might be something worth giving a shot that they might not have thought of before, or might make a difference within what they're doing on the day to day this week.
I'd say if you don't have a lunchbox, get a lunchbox. Because when you have a lunchbox, with a ice pack in it, and you have it with you, you can be prepared for those moments when you're hungry, thirsty. You promised yourself you were going to eat something from the rainbow, and you have an apple you can pull out of your bag. My dad and two out of three of my brothers and my husband today, all lunchbox guys. They take it with them every day. My husband tells anybody who'll listen about how much money he saves compared to his coworkers who go out and buy lunch every day. I know another gentleman who works for the state of California. He has packed a peanut butter sandwich for lunch every day for 26 years. He's retiring at the end of next month. And what he's most sad about is his wife making him think about something else for lunch. So, packing your lunch, having a lunch bag, lunch box, a thermos of something delicious to drink. I think that is a way to save money. It takes a little planning, but it helps you with that intention to make some small changes that will have big impact for your health and well-being. And I think saving money today, given inflation, costs of farming, costs of food, is a good motivator for a lot of folks.
I have to say, I love a peanut butter sandwich as much as the next person, but 20 years of that feels like a little bit much to me. But the sentiment behind what you're saying, though, I think it goes to show that yes, there's a lot of great things that you can be doing, and that's such a simple one. Just being, and it's so easy and nice when you do have those items on hand because truly it does take less time to be able to go to the lunchbox and get your lunch or your snacks than having to go into town, into the farm, or wherever it else may be. But as we wrap up, Amy, with our discussion here today, and we've got some great tips and tricks that you've gave us. But is there any other message that you want to leave with our producers after they leave today's discussion?
Well, first of all, I want to thank them for doing this hard work to bring dairy products to the rest of us. Farming is such a gift to the world. I know there are fewer and fewer farmers, fewer and fewer dairy farmers in our country with each passing year. So I just want to thank everybody in the audience. And then my final piece of advice is just take some time to slow down, to breathe more deeply, and to think about what you need or what you need to do to feel better emotionally and physically as you move forward doing this very important work on behalf of those of us who aren't on farms today.
Well, Amy, I think that is the best way to end today's discussion. So thank you so much for your time here this afternoon. It was a true pleasure to have you back on and be able to go through some of these topics and to be thinking about some habits and changes that we can maybe be making in our lives to help not only physically but mentally as well. So thank you so much for your time here again this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Amber.
I also want to say thank you to those who joined us here today on the Dairy Signal. Whether you're watching live or after the fact, we appreciate you and all the hard work that you're doing. With all of that being said, we hope to see you here tomorrow as we have another great episode. I was going to say recipe. We have another great episode tomorrow. Pardon me. But with all that being said, stay safe and we'll see you here tomorrow on the Dairy Signal. Bye now.